Have you ever really thought about the sheer scale of global shipping? I mean, every single day, thousands of these massive vessels are crisscrossing our oceans. They're carrying everything from your morning coffee to the car you drive. So, what's the safety net? What makes sure these steel giants are actually safe and not a ticking time bomb for our environment? Well, the answer lies in this powerful but kind of invisible system called port state control. Right, so the world of shipping doesn't just operate in a free-for-all. It follows a really complex rulebook that's set by the International Maritime Organization, or the IMO. Think of them as the UN agency that creates the global standards for, well, pretty much everything. Ship construction, equipment, crew training, pollution prevention. It's the blueprint for a safe maritime world. But, having rules is one thing. Enforcing? That's a whole different story. On paper, a ship's home country, its flag state, is the one responsible for its safety. But what happens when that ship is thousands of miles from home? What's stopping a poorly maintained vessel from just hopping from port to port, putting its crew and our oceans at risk? And that is where we meet the ocean's real gatekeepers. These are the inspectors who are the last line of defense. The people on the ground making sure that the rules set by the IMO are actually being followed. The scale is just mind-boggling. And look, the vast majority of ships are run professionally, they meet all the international standards. But a small fraction, they cut corners. And in an industry this massive, even a tiny fraction means a whole lot of dangerous vessels out on the water. So the official term for these problem ships is a substandard ship. And what's really interesting is the definition you see here. It's not just about a rusty hull or a faulty engine. Look closer. It specifically calls out the crew. Are they qualified? Are there enough of them? It's a much bigger picture of safety that knows just how crucial the human element really is. Now, this right here is the core idea that makes the whole system work: fairness. Port state control runs on what's called the no more favorable treatment rule. Basically, it means it doesn't matter where a ship is from or what rules its home country follows. The moment it enters a port, it's held to the exact same high standard as every other ship. No exceptions, no free passes. Okay, so how does this actually work in the real world? I mean, with thousands of ships coming and going, how on earth do you find the few that are unsafe? Well, it all comes down to the inspector's playbook. The real heroes of this whole story are the Port State Control Officers, the PSCOs. And these aren't just clipboard carriers, they are highly qualified experts. We're talking former captains, chief engineers, people who really know their stuff. And they have the legal authority to board any foreign vessel and check if it's safe to be at sea. Now, they can't inspect every single nut and bolt on every ship. That would be impossible. So they use a really methodical process. It kicks off with an initial inspection, checking the paperwork, getting a feel for the ship's general condition. And if something seems off, if they find what are called clear grounds, then they escalate to a much more detailed inspection. So what are these clear grounds? Well, this slide gives you a perfect idea. It could be something obvious, like a big crack in the hull you can see from the dock. But it's often way more subtle. For instance, is the crew familiar with emergency procedures? A PSCO might just ask them to run a fire drill on the spot. And if they're fumbling around or don't know what to do, that is a massive red flag that something is seriously wrong. And this is where that human element is just so critical. The most important tool a PSCO has is their professional judgment. The rules are explicit. They have to be free from commercial pressure. The port might want that ship to leave on schedule, the company might be losing money, but the PSCO's only job is to decide if that ship is safe, period. Their integrity is literally the foundation of this entire system. So this brings us to the most serious action a PSCO can possibly take. What happens when the problems they find are so severe that the inspector just can't, in good conscience, let that ship leave port? Just think about that for a second. Stopping a multi-million-dollar commercial vessel is a huge decision. So what crosses the line? What takes an issue from a simple deficiency to something that actually warrants a full-blown detention? And here's the official definition. The key phrase to lock onto here is presenting a danger. A PSCO detains a ship when they believe that if it were to sail, it would pose an unacceptable risk to the people on board, to other ships, or to the marine environment. And here are some very real and very serious examples of what that means. We're talking about fundamental failures, a steering system that doesn't work, lifeboats that literally can't be launched, fire alarms that are just disconnected, or not having enough qualified crew to safely operate the ship. These aren't minor hiccups. They are recipes for disaster. And it's so important to get this. A detention isn't a fine. It's not a punishment. It's a safety intervention. The inspector is basically saying, this ship is not leaving my port until these dangerous problems are fixed. It stays right there at the dock until it can prove it's actually seaworthy. But the story doesn't stop when a ship gets detained. Nope. In fact, that's when this whole other process kicks into gear, one that turns a single inspection into a data point that actually strengthens safety for everyone. A detention in, say, Rotterdam or Singapore isn't just treated as a local problem. It immediately sends ripples through the entire international maritime community. It triggers a formal, global chain of accountability. And this slide maps out that chain perfectly. First, the port state tells the ship's flag state, hey, we've got one of yours. Then a full report goes to the flag state and the IMO. Now, the flag state has to investigate and report back on how they're going to fix the underlying problem. And finally, the IMO analyzes all this data from around the world to spot trends and make the rules better for everyone. It's a perfect feedback loop designed for constant improvement. And what this all does is enforce flag state responsibility. It prevents countries from just acting as flags of convenience, simply registering ships to collect fees without making sure they're safe. If ships from a certain flag keep getting detained, it becomes obvious to the whole maritime world, and that creates powerful pressure for them to clean up their act. So, at the end of the day, why does all this matter? Well, because port state control protects lives, the lives of the seafarers working on these ships. It protects our oceans from devastating pollution. And by keeping unsafe ships out of service, it ensures the global supply chains we all depend on can keep running smoothly. It's a system that benefits every single one of us. So, the next time you see one of those massive ships gliding into a harbor, loaded up with goods from all over the world, just take a second and ask yourself, who are the unseen gatekeepers who made sure that vessel was safe enough to complete its journey? And now you know the answer.